Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Sami, and today we're diving into a topic that's both controversial and crucial in the modern workplace: why employees and managers hate HR. Joining me is my co host, Linda. Today we'll explore the multifaceted role of HR and the challenges it faces. So, Linda, what's your initial take on this topic?
Hey, Sammy. I think it's a really interesting topic. I've heard so many stories from both sides, employees feeling like HR isn't on their side, and managers feeling like HR is too rigid. It's a complex issue, and I'm excited to unpack it. Where do you think we should start?
Absolutely. Let's start with the basics. The role of HR in the workplace is multifaceted. They handle everything from hiring and onboarding to employee relations and policy enforcement. But often, this broad scope can lead to confusion and frustration. For example, when employees feel like their concerns aren't being heard, it can create a significant disconnect. What do you think are some of the main reasons employees feel this way?
Hmm, I think one of the main reasons is communication breakdowns. Employees often feel like they're not getting clear, transparent information from HR. For instance, if someone has a concern about their workload or feels they're being treated unfairly, they might reach out to HR. But if they don't get a timely or satisfactory response, it can really erode trust. Have you seen this in your experience?
Absolutely. Communication is key. I remember a case where an employee felt like their overtime hours weren't being recognized. They reached out to HR multiple times, but it took weeks for the issue to be addressed. By then, the employee was already feeling burnt out and disillusioned. This brings us to our next topic: policy enforcement and flexibility. HR often has to enforce company policies, but sometimes these policies can feel inflexible and unrealistic. How do you think HR can strike a balance?
That's a great point. Policies are necessary, but they need to be adaptable to different situations. For example, during the pandemic, many companies had to quickly adapt their remote work policies. Some HR departments were more flexible and supportive, while others stuck rigidly to pre existing rules, which didn't work well. I think HR needs to be more proactive in understanding the needs of both employees and managers and be willing to make adjustments when needed. What are your thoughts on that, Sammy?
I completely agree. Flexibility is crucial, especially in dynamic environments. Moving on, let's talk about HR's role in conflict resolution. Conflict is inevitable in any workplace, but how HR handles these situations can make or break employee morale. For instance, if two team members are having a disagreement, a good HR department will mediate the conflict fairly and transparently. But if HR seems biased or dismissive, it can escalate the issue. What are some best practices you've seen in this area?
You bring up a good point. One of the best practices I've seen is HR conducting thorough investigations and involving neutral third parties when necessary. This helps ensure that all sides are heard and that the resolution is fair. Another important aspect is follow up. After a conflict is resolved, HR should check in to make sure everything is still on track and that no new issues have arisen. What are some common pitfalls in this process?
One of the biggest pitfalls is when HR doesn't follow through. If a conflict is resolved, but no follow up occurs, employees might feel like their concerns aren't being taken seriously. Another issue is perceived bias. If employees feel like HR is favoring management over them, it can create a toxic environment. This leads us to our next topic: employee engagement and retention. How does HR's role in conflict resolution impact these areas?
It's a significant impact. When employees feel supported and heard, they're more likely to be engaged and committed to their work. Conversely, if they feel ignored or neglected, they're more likely to look for opportunities elsewhere. I've seen companies where HR actively works on building a positive culture and addressing employee concerns, and the turnover rate is much lower. What are some strategies HR can use to improve engagement and retention?
Great question. One effective strategy is regular communication. HR can use surveys, town hall meetings, and one on one check ins to stay connected with employees. Another strategy is offering professional development opportunities. When employees feel like they're growing and learning, they're more likely to stay. But even with these strategies, there can be issues of perceived bias. How can HR ensure that their decisions are fair and transparent?
That's a tough one. One way is to have clear, documented processes for decision making. For example, if HR is making a promotion decision, they should have a transparent criteria that's communicated to all employees. Another approach is to involve multiple stakeholders in the decision-making process to ensure a balanced perspective. What are some real-world examples you've seen of HR handling this well?
One example I can share is a tech company where HR implemented a 360-degree feedback system. This allowed employees to provide anonymous feedback on their peers and managers, which was then used to inform performance reviews and promotions. It created a more transparent and fair process. Moving on, let's talk about the impact of HR on company culture. How does HR's role in shaping and maintaining culture affect employee morale and productivity?
That's a fascinating topic. HR has a huge role in shaping company culture. For example, if a company values work-life balance, HR can implement policies that support this, like flexible working hours and generous leave policies. On the other hand, if HR enforces strict, rigid policies without considering the impact on employees, it can create a toxic culture. I've seen companies where HR actively promotes a positive, inclusive environment, and the results are impressive. What are some key elements of a positive company culture?
Absolutely. A positive culture is built on trust, respect, and open communication. HR can foster this by creating a safe and inclusive environment where employees feel valued and heard. Another important element is recognition and appreciation. When employees feel their contributions are recognized, they're more motivated and engaged. But there's also the issue of compensation fairness. How does HR's role in compensation impact employee perceptions and morale?
Compensation is a huge deal. Employees want to feel like they're being paid fairly for their work. If there's a perception of unfairness, it can lead to dissatisfaction and turnover. I've seen companies where HR conducts regular salary reviews and market analyses to ensure that compensation is competitive and fair. But it's not just about the numbers, it's also about transparency. Employees should understand how their salary is determined and how they can advance. What are some best practices in this area?
Absolutely, transparency is key. HR should have clear guidelines for how salaries are determined and communicate these to employees. Regular performance reviews and feedback sessions can also help employees understand how they can advance and what they need to do to get there. Another important area is HR's role in diversity and inclusion. How does HR support a diverse and inclusive workplace? And why is this important?
Diversity and inclusion are critical. A diverse workforce brings a variety of perspectives and ideas, which can lead to innovation and better decision-making. HR can support this by implementing diversity hiring practices, offering training on unconscious bias, and creating a safe space for all employees. I've seen companies where HR actively celebrates different cultures and backgrounds, which creates a more inclusive environment. What are some challenges in this area?
One of the biggest challenges is overcoming unconscious bias. Even with the best intentions, people can have biases that affect their decisions. HR needs to provide ongoing training and support to help employees recognize and address these biases. Another challenge is ensuring that diversity initiatives are not just token gestures, but are genuinely impactful. Finally, let's look at the future of HR in a remote work environment. How do you think HR's role will evolve as more companies adopt remote and hybrid models?
That's a great question. HR will need to adapt to the new normal of remote work. This includes ensuring that remote employees have the necessary tools and support, fostering a sense of community and connection, and addressing the unique challenges of remote work, like isolation and work-life balance. I think we'll see more innovative HR practices emerging to support remote teams. What are your predictions for the future of HR in this context?
I think we'll see a greater focus on digital HR tools and platforms that facilitate communication and collaboration. HR will also need to become more agile and responsive to the changing needs of a remote workforce. Training and development will be even more crucial, as employees will need to upskill in new technologies and ways of working. It's an exciting time for HR, and I can't wait to see how it evolves. Linda, any final thoughts?
Thanks, Sami. It's been a great discussion. HR has a vital role to play in the modern workplace, and while there are challenges, there are also many opportunities for improvement. I'm optimistic about the future of HR and how it can positively impact both employees and managers. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Linda, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world of HR.